Everybody, welcome back to another Stray Basilisk coding stream. This is Jason. This is coding stream number 14, I believe now. 13 having gone off fairly uneventfully with no major disasters. Hopefully we keep up that track record. Starting a bit late, had some issues with internet connection, as always seems to happen around this time. Yeah, but I think we're good to go. Get started with this stream. So, as usual, we held a vote on Twitter. There are a couple of new options on there this time. And one which I newly added was a virtual board game, which was kind of vague and mysterious, but it's something that I kind of wanted to try out and which is also kind of relevant to our main project, Steamhounds. So what is this game going to be? So if anyone has any ideas about kind of little simple board game type things they'd like me to try and implement, then I'm also kind of willing to just go off in a totally different direction. But I had some kind of idea for something which we might be able to do. So what I was thinking about was something which is kind of loosely based on how we pictured the Steamhounds campaign to work, but like a super simplified version of that, you know, without the actual combat mechanics and a lot of the detailed narrative and story stuff, but in terms of the basic like resource management, board gamey roster management like layer to it. That's kind of something I wanted to play around with here. This is maybe super ambitious as well, so this may be a terrible idea to try and do this in one stream, so we may have to cut some corners, but you know, we'll see how far we can get. So the way I'm thinking that this will work is that we will have a kind of roster of characters, and these would be like your board game pieces, I guess. So we'd have a little character portraits here. These could represent like little tokens or figures you'd get in a board game. I suppose little cardboard push out things if it's a cheap board game, or like crazy 3D printed things if it's a more expensive one. But you'd have your kind of roster of characters. You would have some kind of resources, so at the very least you'd have money, so maybe I'll draw a little Mario coin here, and then maybe some other stuff. We'll see what makes sense. But then the core of the game will be that there are kind of missions which appear on here, a little flag or something like that, and they have slots where you can kind of assign these characters. You know, maybe there's a couple of missions available to you. The idea being that you could kind of pick one of these characters up and kind of drag them into these missions to like assign them in there. And then maybe there's some other stuff you could do, like you'd have other kind of assets over this side. And these would be things like maybe like a doctor, which you could send characters into. We have the idea of like an intel gathering, like spy network, where you can assign your characters to there. So, you know, you choose where to assign your characters to some combination of these missions and to these kind of other assets. So it's kind of like a worker placement game if you're into your board games. Still a load of questions about what mechanics we need to like really make this a proper game. And we have a load of stuff in mind for the actual Steamhounds campaign, so I'll try and pick and choose a few of those mechanics we're kind of playing around with at the moment to see, you know, what's a minimal set which we can work with to actually make this game like somewhat, you know, make it an actual game which you can win and lose and have a score and stuff. Yeah, so that's the basic setup, and the way that these kind of missions I think will work is that once you've assigned your characters, you'll be able to kind of start the mission, like maybe there's a button or something like that, and then there's kind of like a randomized process which determines how well you do on this mission. You know, in the real Steamhounds game, this will involve you actually playing out the mission and doing battles and stuff, but for this board game purpose, we're going to like simulate some dice rolls or something like that. And again, in the interest of simplicity, I will probably just be like writing out text into a little console down here to kind of show you how that mission like plays out. But there needs to be some element of strategy to this, right? So one thing is that the missions should give you some kind of bonus, like maybe they should have like a monetary reward, or if you complete the mission, it gives you coins, and then maybe that's your score. And in terms of which characters you choose to assign to each mission, I'm thinking the way it will work is that the characters will have some kind of stats or like attributes, and so will the mission, right? So maybe the mission has like a stealthy attribute, and then like a, say, a combat attribute. Let's say something else like a recon sort of intelligence gathering attribute, and then so will these characters, right? So the way I'm thinking to resolve this is, so this mission maybe includes like a stealth challenge, a combat challenge, and a recon challenge. You could imagine like drawing this from a deck of cards or something representing like going through the mission. And then we just need a system to work out how well you do in the mission based on which characters you've chosen. So I'm thinking maybe our characters will also each have like 1 or 2 tags, like maybe this one's good at stealth, you know, maybe this one's good at combat, you know, so this one, maybe this one's also good at stealth. And based on what you've assigned to the mission, let's say you've assigned 2 stealthy characters to this mission, then when it comes to do the stealth challenge, I don't know, maybe you get to like roll 2 dice because you've got 2 like characters with the appropriate skill, and if you get a high enough score, then you can sort of complete that part of the mission. Otherwise you fail, which maybe means the whole mission is gone, or maybe it means like one of your characters gets knocked out or injured or something. So, you know, we'll figure out the exact details of this, and as I'm explaining it, it sounds kind of complicated, and I'm beginning to doubt that I have time to implement this whole thing, but you know, we'll see where we go. So let's kind of get started with some real basics for this. So as usual, I'm using processing, which is a Java-based tool. If you check back in any of the previous streams, you'll see me sort of introduce this. I'm going to kind of speed ahead now since we have a fair amount of stuff to get done, and I don't want this to go on for too many hours. So in processing, we define 2 functions, one that gets run at the very start just once, and then one that gets run sort of for every frame. We're also going to need some other information. Let's sort of break down what we have here. What are the like components of this game? So we definitely have characters. And these characters definitely have, let's call these attributes or tags or something like that. Let's call it tags. I also like the idea that maybe a character can be, you know, tags. There can be many tags that are supposed to be 3 dots. There you go. Maybe they also have like a status, like are they healthy, are they injured, or something like that. Wow, cannot write with this stylus. We also have missions. And each mission has, we talked about like as if you're drawing from a deck of cards which says, hey, no, you have to do like a stealth challenge. Let's say a mission has a set of phases or challenges. That's that. We also have the sort of overall game state, if you like. The board, if you will. And the game state has your whole set of characters, like your, let's call it your roster. It has whatever missions are currently being displayed. It also has maybe other resources, like your money. It has these assets. Let's see, money. These are the assets. What I'm picturing for these assets, and I don't know if we'll get around to implementing these, is these are like special things you can trigger. So maybe if you use this intel thing, it costs you a certain amount of money, but it will give you a hint as to what traits might be useful for one of these missions. Like maybe you use it and then it says pick which mission you want to get more intelligence about, and then you click one of these missions and it reveals what these challenges are. So then you can trade off, do I sort of take a gamble by assigning characters sort of randomly to this mission, or do I invest in finding out more about the mission, so it costs me some money, but then I have a better idea about which characters are going to be most effective. Okay, so as a starting point, I think that probably works for us, so I can start skeletoning out some classes to represent this stuff. So let's say we want characters. Character probably has a name. They have a set of tags. Let me kind of create this as a separate enum here. So we had, stealth, we had combat, we had like intel. I'm thinking like, D&D stats as a kind of model for these, or skills. Animal handling. I don't know why that sprung to mind. We can, if anyone's got suggestions in the chat, we can throw stuff into here that we think will be fun. That'll do for now. So a character has a set of stats. Or we can rather say, we can say a list of tags. We can make this an array. It's kind of going to be a little bit easier to deal with. So they have the tags, and then they have a status. We can probably simplify that to just saying like, if they're injured or not. I think that's the only status we really need. Okay. Then we have, what else do we have? So we had the idea of a mission. And what data do we need to track for a mission? So a mission has, I guess, a set of these challenges. So let me actually create a challenge first. Although really all the challenges is a certain tag, which we're going to sort of do like a skill check kind of thing for. So it'd be nice if we could give those like descriptions and flavor text and stuff. So, okay, I may do that because even if right now it just contains like one of these tags, later on we can extend that with like description and stuff. Let's also make a little, for our convenience, a constructor so we can create one of these things easily. This is where I wish the processing editor had like auto generation things for this. This syntax, by the way, if you're not familiar with this, it's so I can do something like, so normally when I create a character, I'd say like new character and give them a name. And then with this ... it means I can pass in like multiple tags. Like as a list like this. So it kind of gives you like a variable number of things and it will kind of crunch those down into a little array for you, which can be a handy way of typing these out. Okay, what's wrong here? Does it actually need to be like this? looks good. Okay. So challenge has a tag. Let's give this a description we as well. So a mission has basically a set of challenges like that. Let's give it a description as well. All I'm doing really right now is modeling out the sort of data structure for this whole thing. And then let's create our game state, or let's call it board state, since this is kind of supposed to be a board game, even though it's not really. And what is in a board state? So you have a set of characters. We have a set of missions. To say the amount of money that the player has. Let me create one of these. Let's just say kind of just start these out empty. Be generous and give the player some money. I don't know if this is balanced or makes any sense, but gotta have something to start with. Okay, so what have we now got covered? So we kind of have our set of characters, and each character can be injured or not injured, and they have a set of tags associated with them. We have the idea of a mission, which literally just has a set of these challenges, which have kind of descriptions, and then each one has a tag. And we have our kind of amount of money. So before I get too deep into laying out the whole logical structure, let's maybe actually try getting something drawn on screen. So I have borrowed an image. Some of you may be familiar with from a previous episode. We used this for in fact, the very first coding stream episode, which was the ink spill thing. If you remember this cool kind of ink spill effect we made using this map. I figure we're going to use the same map for this. Actually, we've kind of just drawn these missions floating out here, so their specific location isn't really super important, so it's kind of just there as a pretty background, to be honest, but that's fine. So we need that. We also need a thought better of that naming. Okay, how big is this image actually? (900 by 800), so I guess that can be our window size. Select the background. Let's give ourselves an initial kind of game state. Um, you know what, let's also create some initial kind of characters to load in here. Any suggestions for character names in the chat? Otherwise I may just see who's online and put your put your usernames in here. So or not? Shall I add myself? Or shall I go, let's go with steampunk's characters, be less egocentric, okay. So we have the warrior, and then the next thing when we created the characters, we need to give them a set of tags. So what were our tags? Well, the warrior's good at combat, right? Of course. Kind of how to specify things like that. Okay, let's create a couple more. Let's create some more of these tags actually. I'm gonna call this so ranger's good at combat and kind of just making these up, they're a bit arbitrary. You know what might be kind of interesting is if we could give characters could potentially have multiple of the same tag, which would mean they're like super good at one particular thing. Maybe we could factor that into how we like resolve the missions and do the die rolls and stuff. So the engineer is good at. That's my autocomplete. Okay. Why not? Okay, that'll probably do for now. Probably create some missions here, right? If anyone has any good ideas for like thematic missions, that could be cool. So by the way, I'm just kind of hard coding some things in now so that I can set up some kind of state in the game and then ultimately draw this stuff out on a board. In the future, maybe this stuff will be like randomly filled in, or you know, as you go through the game, new missions will be generated or pulled from like a deck, if you like, of missions. For now, I'm just going to sort of, you know, add them directly in here. So mission has a description, and it has a set of challenges. So I can kind of maybe nest these under here. Challenge also has a description and it has a tag. Okay. Let's say scope out the target, which requires observation. Okay, we can then add another one like this. This is a bit ugly. If you remember when we did stuff with JavaScript and some other languages, there's a nicer way to like construct this whole like structure of objects like this without having these new all over the place. But for now, this kind of works, I think. So what I'm trying to do is build up a little narrative of this mission out of these parts. So do we have stealth as a tag? Definitely should. Into the facility. Maybe we then need to defeat the guards. Maybe we sneak back out. Don't know. That seems like a reasonable mission to me. All these brackets are getting confusing. Thankfully, this will highlight for us. So we're adding to this mission list. We're creating a new mission which has a description and several of these challenges, which are sort of all nested in here. And then these brackets kind of line up a bit more like this. Maybe that's a bit clearer what's going on there. It's not ideal. Ultimately, this should probably go in like a config file and all get read out, but for convenience, it's kind of okay, I think, to just lay stuff out like this. Okay, that's one mission. You know what, we can just do one for now and test a lot of this process with this. Okay. So that sets up the board state, and now we kind of we want to draw something like this based on that same information which we had. Haven't got to assets yet. We'll maybe do that later on if we get something running in a reasonable amount of time. So I kind of want to draw our background image. With its corner like pinned to the top left, we should have it fill the whole screen for us. So all we should see now is the background. Okay, there's our background right there. So our characters, if we're going to draw our characters, those need some kind of visual representation, and thankfully I have a game we can steal stuff from. So these are some of the portraits from Steamhound, so I'm just going to like crop out some of these and use these. Okay, I feel like, so there's actually like shadows around these, and I really want to crop them like to perfectly get the shadows so they don't look weirdly clipped, but I'm going to resist that urge and just do it roughly. This is a new character, by the way. So all these ones at the bottom are kind of prototype characters we've introduced recently to Steamhounds, which have kind of like generic sprites. It's the newest one, which was added to the game on Wednesday, which you can check out via our Discord if you want to get into that. So I'm just going to copy these out into separate files. Ideally, I'd probably like make a sprite sheet to be more efficient, but you know, this is a board game. Like FPS is not going to be a huge concern for us. Okay, I'm going to then crop these. Which there's a keyboard shortcut for this. Okay, then I'm going to export these. chemist. So I'm naming them like this because it matches what I name the characters in the code. So I'm just going to be able to do something where I just tack icon on the end and know what the appropriate file name is. Should be okay. This character in the game is actually called Totem. Thanks, Millie, for giving them that nickname, which is now stuck. This one is referred to as Shio. And this one is still just poor Prototype 8. Or Car 8 for short. Jury is still open on what their nickname will be. Okay, so we now should be able to load all of those icons in, and I think I'll have this happen inside here maybe, and I can probably just do it at this point. Image name plus underscore icon.png. Bit hacky, but honestly this is probably okay. So compared to some of the other streams, there's not going to be any fancy rendering stuff in particular going on here. So let's start drawing these people out. So I kind of need a position to start drawing them. So I'm going to copy one of these for sort of testing purposes. So top left of the screen, if you remember, is 0, 0. I add something new. I feel like I'm going to want to draw these based on their central position. That's going to be convenient. They fit quite nicely in there, so let's just start them at, so my cursor position is showed down here, like 45 by 140. So I'm just going to loop through. Let's create some constants up here for this stuff. Is it 45? $140, and then in terms of like spacing between these things, something like that, which is like 80 odd pixels. This kind of tells me what I need to draw them in like a vertical strip. So we're going to start at this start Y position, and then it's going to go through the roster. And I'm going to say I want to draw an image, which is going to be the character's image. It's going to be at roster start X by Y, and then I kind of want to move the Y down by spacing. Yeah, so we always draw the same X coordinate, and the Y coordinate starts at the top and then steps down by 80 or so each time, which should effectively draw out this roster for us. Probably going to crash because I've named a file wrong and something's not going to match, or it will work. Okay, only issue is that these are, because we drew this background image like based on its corner position, processing lets you draw things according to their corner or according to their center, and for convenience it's going to be nice to draw these things according to their center. So I'm just going to switch this to center. There we go. So be nice not to be able to drag these things around, I think. Which probably means... Okay, so thinking about it, each one of these characters is going to be, aside from whether they're injured or not, they have another kind of state, which is in terms of like their placement on the board, or kind of what's going on with the user's interaction, if you like. So they can just be sat in the roster, they can be currently being dragged, or they can be currently like assigned to a mission, I think. So we probably want some way to track what like state they're in, which determines, you know, do we draw them here? Do we draw them like according to where they're being dragged to, or do we like draw them, you know, here when they're assigned to a mission, or later on maybe when they're assigned to one of these assets. So what I think I'm going to do is create another thing. So there's a slight annoying quirk with processing, is in that it's can't really just define an enum. What I'd normally do here is define an enum like inside the character class, because it's only really relevant in that context. But in processing, you more or less have to define everything at the top level. So I'm going to call it assignment. Let's say like they're either in the roster, or they're dragged, or they're in a mission, something like that. That's always just going to start off as in the roster, right? Okay. Now what we kind of need to be able to do is to handle this click and drag stuff, right? So if the mouse is pressed, we kind of need to check, are we like over a character? That makes sense. So I kind of don't want to duplicate this code. There's got to be a nicer way to do this. So what I'm thinking is, in order to determine whether the mouse is over one of these things and whether I can drag it, we again need to like calculate their positions, which would mean like duplicating that code we used to draw them originally to figure out again where their positions are. So it makes sense that I kind of want to maybe pull that out into a different function. So something like something which will calculate kind of where they are. So how can we do this? So there's a few different cases, right, based on the character's assignment. If they are in the roster, then we kind of need to do something like this, right? It's a little bit ugly. I believe this should work for us. So we kind of want to say if Okay, hopefully this makes sense. So what we're doing is, to calculate their position, if they're in the roster, we kind of need to step through the roster until we find which slot they're in. Like, I could have tagged them with like their position in that list or something, so I wouldn't have to do this, but this works kind of okay for me. So that's that case. Another case is they're being dragged. Thought we called it dragged. Yep. They're being dragged, then they should just be wherever the mouse is. If they're in the mission, we don't quite know yet how this is going to work, so I'm just going to have a little placeholder of return. Stick them somewhere in the middle of the screen somewhere. Okay. This should be okay for us. And if it's in a case you haven't handled at all, I'm just going to kind of put them at 0, 0. Again, that shouldn't really happen, because we've covered each case here. That would kind of happen if they weren't in this roster, so probably actually do that. I should realise I've covered every case and stop shouting at me, perhaps. Okay. So now all we're kind of doing here, in fact, is use this little helper function to calculate the position. And then we just draw them directly at that position. So what I've done here is kind of shifted this logic out into a little helper function. But this will be useful shortly when we try and implement the dragging stuff. Okay, seems to be putting them in the correct places. But what we can do is, when the mouse is pressed, we can go through every character in the roster. We can say if do a similar thing here, in fact. We kind of want to find the distance between their position and the mouse position. Okay. I'm going to say if the distance is less than, how big are these things? We kind of want just the radius of this. Okay, so they're like 40 or 80 pixels across, so if the distance is less than equal to 40, that's not great. We can do this in code in a way that's a bit more flexible. Image.width divided by 2, something like that. That's nicer. Okay, if that's the case, then I'm going to now start dragging you, which works like this. And then we're done, right? Like, we've already got a match, like we're not going to check anything else. Just do this kind of thing. And again, this is a little bit of a janky way to do that, but when they're released, we can say . go through all the characters. If it's not the one we're dragging, then we can just skip over it. Otherwise, it is the one we're dragging. Now we need the logic for like placing them back down. When we start drawing missions and other stuff, we can do that a bit more cleverly, but for now, let's just shove them back in the roster. Okay. So hopefully what this does, if you walk through this logic, when the mouse is pressed, we're going to figure out the mouse position, go through every character, get their position, using our handy helper function, find out how far away that is from the mouse, and if we're within half the size of the thing, which basically means if we're within their kind of circle, then we're going to set them to be in this dragged state, and then later on when we draw the characters, this thing is going to, if they're being dragged, it's going to put their position where the mouse is. So there are many ways we could have done this, but for now I think this will probably do the job. Cool. If I let go, remember all the code does when we release the mouse, it just puts them back into the roster, so they pop back into their spot. Could get fancy and have the list like collapse back down or something when they're, you know, and be able to like reorder things in here, but that's kind of unnecessary for our purposes right now. Let's think about actually drawing this mission out. And what should a mission look like? So I'm thinking we can kind of just do it really simply as like a block here with like the description of the mission and then like slots for those characters. So let's think about drawing a mission. So I'm thinking we probably want to draw a mission as like a rectangle. Let's make up the rule that there are 2 missions like every round of the game, so each one can have a fairly well-defined place to go. Maybe the first one starts like, well, here, right? That kind of makes sense, which is y is 245. So let's do something similar here. And their x, which is kind of just going to be the width divided by 2, so 450. Don't think of the need there in spacing. It's going to be kind of like this distance, which is about 325. Cool. And for now, let's just draw them as a rectangle. So similarly to drawing an image, we have this. You know what? I've got some nice frame graphics I can steal. Let's use those. Why not? Going through my old database of template stuff. Yeah, you know what, screw it, let's steal from this. So this is like the patch release announcement for Steam Hounds. I kind of want to take this frame out because I feel like it'd be a nice thing we could use for representing these missions. So I'm just going to take, I don't know why it's just a flat thing, let's just take this, let's clear out some of this text. I love these little skull icons we have. So it's going to be super hacked together. Just going to patchwork this into a reasonable shape which we can use. I always think this music is so cool, like the stream background music, but it's a little bit. It makes what I'm doing seem way more serious and dangerous than it really is. Oh, I kind of screwed this up somehow. What have I done there? Just kind of amuses me that we've got this crazy intense high tension music for me copying transparent grey bits of pixels around. This is the life I chose. Okay. So there's our frame. Match that down. We probably want to make this a reasonable size for our actual map here. You know what? That's pretty great, right? As it is, I will just crop it and maybe make it more a bit less transparent, like maybe something like that. Just merge this down, crop it down, save it as a mission background. Load this as well. Let me do something kind of similar to this, right? And I'm anticipating that I should probably... no, this will be okay for now. Okay, should draw us our blank little box. Nope, it does something weird because I've looked at the wrong image here. Okay. Good point, we should probably draw the characters after the missions because they're going to want to be on top. And I should make sure okay, and if I were to add a kind of duplicate of that same mission again, then we get 2 blocks. Okay, that seems reasonable. There's probably enough space here for like assigning characters onto here somehow. Maybe not the ideal shape. Could probably also fit 3 on here if you wanted. Okay. So drawing those missions, let's also draw like label them. So how do we draw text? Description. Okay, that kind of works for us, but you probably want like slightly bigger. Guessing at numbers here. Okay, seems good to me. Oh, that was weird. And we kind of want to offset that probably by so again, this is going to be hard coded and not ideal by 250 by 70. You know, this is not the way I should be doing this like cleanly, but if we spend all the time trying to render this in a nice clean way, it's gonna cause a huge mess. Okay, so we've got a little space there for the title of the mission. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do is create slots like here, so that if we want to show information about tags about the mission, then it can kind of go in this area, and the actual characters have some room like that. So let's create some kind of space for them. So what can that look like? I kind of want like a socket which I can use. I can maybe use this. And then kind of chop it down somehow. Definitely too big. If I scale it, it's going to look janky, but what other option do I have? Like, how big do we actually want this? Like, T5? Yeah, that's kind of alright. Kind of alright. Bit bigger. It really bothers me that it's going to get like blurified as I scale it, but not a huge amount I can do. Okay, that'll do me. Prop. Export this as. In fact, I can just kind of bake this into this deal. So I'm going to want space for fairly arbitrarily 3 of these. I mean, that's because in the real Steam Hounds you can have 3 characters on a team, like in battle. So that kind of makes sense here. Oh, it's going to really annoy me if these aren't evenly spaced. Kind of proud that they are. Okay. I'll even like put them down here. Again, this is a total waste of my time, but we should do it anyway. Export the mission. Okay, so now in theory we'll be able to drop things onto here. I now need to know that I'm over one of these slots. You know, I probably don't. I can probably allow them to drop the character like anywhere on this mission and have it just put them in a slot anyway. Okay, so we need to find out which mission they are assigned to. There's 2 ways we can do this, right? Like the character themselves, like just like they have this assignment here. I could have like in mission 1, in mission 2, or the mission itself could have a list of characters who are in it, which is actually probably a cleaner way to do things, because we're going to need to know that later when we like actually resolve the mission. So let's do it that way. Okay, that's going to start out empty. So what we kind of want to do is, like, if the mouse is generally over a mission when we're dragging a character, we want to drop them onto that mission, assuming there are kind of free slots, if you like. So let's do something similar to this, and in fact let's kind of take this code to here. If logic is going to be pretty much exactly the same, this is the mission we care about, then return this. Kind of want, like, I should return null here because I would like an exception to get thrown somewhere down the line rather than stuff getting drawn into a position, because it really should never happen. Okay. So what a lot of this UI stuff, is stuff which you'd really take for granted, right? Like being able to tell, is the mouse like over, you know, when I click on here, is the mouse over this area? Is the mouse like over one of my little icons? Ultimately, someone has to code that stuff. It's the kind of thing you code and then bury it away in some function and then forget about it. But this kind of UI layout stuff is actually quite fiddly if you want it to be, you know, like the dynamic aspect of like being able to lay down these things, and the length depends on the length of the text and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of like what we're doing here, and it can actually get pretty complicated. We're kind of taking easy routes and having a lot of hard-coded positions for stuff, but yeah, like you can get pretty deep if you want to do this in a nice, really elegant, flexible way. Could spend many evenings just working on like a UI layout framework, but we're just going to hack together something that works. So ultimately, if we want to see if we're dropping on a mission, we have to go for every mission, we have to work out the position of it on the screen, we have to work out if the mouse cursor is inside that box or not. It's a pretty manual thing. So how do we tell if the mouse is sort of over that? So we're going to say if the mouse X is greater than, first we need the position. So thinking about this thing on the screen, mission pos, that variable we just calculated, is here. So to work out if the mouse is inside here, we need to figure out the kind of whole bounds of this, right? So like this, is it to the right of that and to the left of that? And is it kind of below that? And is it above that? And if those are all true, then we know it's like within this, the bounds of this mission, and then we can try and drop the character onto it. So in order to do that, so we know this position. To work out the left boundary, we kind of need to subtract this like half width, if you like, and we can do that by, you know, we can write an expression for that, which is something like the x minus mission image dot width divided by 2. I'm going to put brackets in here just for clarity. So mission image dot width over 2 is going to be this like length. So then this x coordinate is the middle minus half the mission image's width, which gives us that. And it's something very similar for the right-hand side. The mouse has to be less than the position plus half the width. And then we need to do something similar for the y-axis. The mouse y has to be greater than the y position minus half the height, and less than the y position plus half the height. Kind of an ugly expression, but this sort of bounds checking is something pretty commonly you end up having to do. Okay, then we're on the mission, right? So we can actually skip, right? If m dot if there are already 3, then we don't need to check it because we can't drop any more. Otherwise, and in this case, we want to say, to add this character in, and this thing we're doing here, where we're recording it, the fact that the character is assigned to the mission here, and then sort of putting the same sort of information here, is there's definitely a cleaner way to do this, but this is kind of a rough and ready thing. It's totally redundant to store both of these things, and anytime you find yourself storing like logically the same bit of information in 2 places, it's probably a bad idea, because it's now possible that these things could get out of sync. Right now, every time I put a character onto or pull them out of a mission, I need to do this bookkeeping and make sure like both of these things are updated and kept in sync. If not, things get in a weird, inconsistent state. Like generally, you should only have 2 sort of copies of the same bit of information, which this like logically is, right? If the assigned characters for a mission contains a character, you know, that list has the character in it, then it means they're in a mission, and this sort of is telling you the same thing. You should only really do this if there's a compelling like performance reason for doing so, or you know, it's super inconvenient to like check this or something. So this is kind of ugly, and I kind of hate myself for doing it, but it's happened, so there we go. If this happens, then we're done. We've found a match for them. Okay. Now also here, when we pick a character up, if they're in a mission, then we need to like do this bookkeeping, right? We need to pull them out of that list. So if assignment, if they're in a mission, we have to do this whole rigmarole of go through every mission to find them. So I could say if this mission's character list contains this character, then take them out. But I can in fact just say mission characters.remove C, and if it's not in there, it'll be no harm, no foul. It just won't do anything. In fact, this remove function probably returns. Does that not work? Does it? Oh, it needs like the index. That's annoying. Okay, so in some languages that would just work. Probably gives me -1 if they're not in there. So I thought this was like remove at. Is that not true? Okay. Anyway, so if they're currently assigned to a mission. Okay, and then one more thing we need to do is if the character's in a mission, then we need to find which mission that is and draw them in like one of these little slots, I guess. So I'm going to do this in a really hacky way. What I'm going to say is if they're in a mission, we need to first find which mission they're in. If that doesn't match, then we're going to get a... something's gone wrong. So if they're not in that mission, then we're going to continue. Otherwise, we've found the mission they're in. So kind of handily, we've already got their like index within this. So we can find the position of the mission, we can find the central position, and then we just need to figure out if they're in like slot 1, 2, or 3, or you know, this is programming, we count from 0. If they're in slot 0, 1, or 2, then they're going to be in a different kind of offset from that. And I'm just going to kind of hard code those in. Not ideal, but so can I do that? I can, okay. So what's going to be the offset? I'm going to add some guides here to help me with that. And this is not the proper way to do this by any means. But if this one, it's like 21 by 42. It's in 1, it's in 2, then these are going to have different X offsets. It's going to be like 114 and 207. Super hacky, but okay, so what are we doing here logically? If the character is assigned to a mission, we go through the missions to find which one they're in. So by using this, which returns either their position in that list or -1 if they're not in it. If they're not in it, then we're going to skip around and check the next mission. If they are, then we find the central point of the mission and offset that. Kind of to either here. We offset that to either here or here or here, depending on which kind of slot they're in. Yeah, ugly, but I think this will kind of get the job done. Probably I've messed something up here. Oop. Okay, gets into the slot. I can pull him out, drop him out, drop him in, out, in, drop somebody else, drop somebody else. Boop, boop. Okay, surprisingly that kind of worked first time. It's a bit rough and ready, but it kind of does the job. Yeah, like this is not ideal. Probably if I'm picking something up, it should be drawn above everything else, but we can just move our mouse around stuff. I don't know. So it'd be nice if our roster, like, you know, moved up or something, but honestly, this is okay for me. Like, this is enough to get the gameplay and logic kind of working at least. So what would be nice now? Okay, let's think about how we actually resolve one of these missions, right? So I'm going to maybe add a little button for resolving the mission. That, and I'm going to pick a reasonable color off here to the extent of my graphic design skill. Let's call it deploy. So here's our, oh, this is going to be so ugly. Okay. Deploy. Let's kind of put at least put a box around it or something. Be real fancy and around the corners. That'll do. That'll do. This is not a graphic design stream. Okay. Trying to pick up a character, and then if we didn't pick up a character, then maybe we've clicked the deploy button, right? So let's go to all the missions. You can say, first of all, if there are no characters assigned, let's just skip that. Doesn't seem reasonable. Otherwise, we're going to need to do something like this, but rather than checking if they've clicked within the whole box, we're going to check that they've clicked within the button kind of location. So there's the missions position. So we kind of need to do a similar thing for finding the left and right, but I'm just going to like manually measure submission position plus 61 and 240, like the left and right bounds. Again, please, if you're working on a serious project, do not hard code everything like this. I'm kind of more interested in the gameplay than the rendering here, but we just need to do something. So the low end is going to be plus 77, or minus 77. No. The bottom is going to be at minus 22, and I'm just reading those down here from like the size of this rectangle. There's a measuring tool, but this usually works for me. So we probably now want to use a function which will actually like resolve this mission. So I feel like that deserves to be put somewhere else. Because this is the meat of like the actual game and dice rolling and resolution and stuff, so we'll give it its own function. So if they click that button, so then we're going to say, well, we need to pass in which mission is being resolved. I'm going to say, okay, so they clicked, so we're going to resolve the mission. And then we're going to return, since we don't want to do anything else. Resolving the mission may involve like putting the characters back and, you know, I don't know, loads of stuff potentially. So what is resolving a mission like? So remember, a mission is a list of these challenges, and for each challenge we kind of want to say how many characters have the matching tag, and then maybe roll some dice based on that, and then if that's above some threshold, then they like complete. Either they need to complete each one to complete the mission, or failing one like injures a character, and I kind of like that more. It means that if every character is injured, then the mission is failed, but you could also like have a partial success. That's a nice kind of mechanism for that, I think. So what we're going to do is we kind of need to go over. Let's do some printing here. Starting a mission and the description there. And let's say, sort of indent this a bit visually. We kind of need to loop here actually, so for challenges, so we're going to loop over these. Okay, for now we can just print this stuff out. It's going to appear down here, and that's, you know, we can add the actual gameplay logic later, but for now this will do something for us. So clicking this for now does nothing. Let's put a couple of characters in and now click. Okay. So we saw that it printed out the various phases of the mission. I can do this multiple times, which ultimately is not right, but for now, start the mission, stop the MacGuffin, scope out the target, sneak into the facility, defeat the guards, and sneak. Oh, that's not right. We want to say back out of the facility. So that's the kind of narrative for our mission there. So what we kind of now want to do is like resolve each challenge, right? So what do we have to play with? So we know the tag for this challenge. Maybe it makes sense also for a challenge to have like a difficulty rating, which can kind of be like a target number, right? So and then when we create these things, we can say, okay, so how's this going to work? So maybe it's something like for each character with the appropriate tag, you're going to get like a die, like a d6 or something to roll. Sorry, I apologize for that. That was shamefully bad. A d6. So, okay, maybe you get one d6 like by default, and then for every character with a matching tag you get another one. So thinking back to like tabletop RPGs, we could just go for the total number. It could be like every die that's like a 5 or a 6 is a success, you need a certain number of successes. I think they're going for a total number is probably fine. It affects how the difficulty curve kind of plays out, if you like. Yeah, I suppose the question here, game design wise, is do we want there to be challenges which are impossible if you don't have a character with the appropriate tag, or should there always be a chance to win, to kind of fluke it? So one way to say that there's always a chance to win is we say we always roll one die, and let's say if the difficulty level of a challenge is 6, it means you need a 6 on the die to win. But if you have a character with the right tag, that gets knocked down to a 5. If you have 2, that gets knocked down to a 4, and so on. That could kind of work. Okay, let's do that for now. We can play around like gameplay wise after that. So make sure to give these difficulties. Let's say this is a difficulty. Difficulty 3, 4, 4, like that. Okay. Difficulty, and then what we're going to do is say for every assigned character. Maybe obviously if they're not injured, and if one of that character's tags is the tags for this challenge. Then okay, that makes sense, right? So let's say it's difficulty 4 challenge, we go through each character. For each one we check character's not injured and their tags contain the tag for this challenge, then we're going to reduce that target number. Okay, let's forget exactly Java. What's the exact syntax here? Okay, whatever. Do I just have to... Slightly annoying. Okay, so it seems like there isn't a convenient way to check whether this array contains a certain tag, so I've written this little helper function which just leaps through. If it finds a match, it returns true, otherwise it returns false here. So now I can say dot has tag if they have the... Because we've got challenge and character, which are both like CH things, I feel like it's better to name these explicitly. You know, we could even log something out here, like... So I'm going to want to print out the tag name here. Okay. Bit of information here. So now we can say target number is target number. Now we need to kind of do the die roll. The processing has some random functions, so between 1 and 6, we probably need 1 and 7, because typically when you do a random number generator, it doesn't, it's like including the bottom number but not the top one. That's generally how these work. Actually check. Processing. Random up to a certain number. Random number between 0 and the value of the hyperparameter. Okay. The value between up to but not including the last number. Okay, so I'm going to need to convert that to an integer. I'm going to say if, let's print out the die roll. Get more information there. Die roll is greater or equal to the target number, and that's a success. Otherwise it's a failure. We can just print these out for now and figure out the sort of game logic around those later. So still the MacGuffin. Let's deploy. Okay, we've got a whole readout here. So starting the mission. Scoping out the target is an observation thing of difficulty 3. Let's add that space in there. Ranger has observation. Target number is 2. Die roll is 2. Oh, that should have been a success, I believe. Oh, okay. Didn't actually print the die roll. Let's try again. Put you onto it and you, and then deploy. So we have an observation task, difficulty 3. Ranger has that tag, target's 2, they're order 5, that's a success. Sneak into the facility. Target number is 4, order 5, success. Combat. We have 2 people, target number is 2, but we rolled a 1, so not doing too good there. Target number is 3, target is 5, 6. Okay, so we have success and failure in these sort of phases working. Stands to reason that if we got to the end of the challenge, then all the challenges, sorry, then the mission was a success. What do we do if there's a failure? I think if there's a success, we'll just sort of proceed to the next challenge. You know what, we probably want a reward for this mission, right? So just give it some money. So I am just printing out a load of stuff down here, by the way, and I'm calling this a board game, which it kind of isn't. In reality, the way I think you do this is you draw a card from a deck and it would say, oh, this is, you know, part of the mission. This is what you need to do. And then you would look at your characters for these matching tags, and then you would sort of actually do this die roll manually, and we'd show some fancy virtual dice rolling or something like that. But in the interest of getting this done in a reasonable period of time, I'm sort of skipping that stuff, which is really just like UI, fancy visual flair anyway. Like the actual basic behavior of it is still kind of here in this stuff. What I may do is have you like press space to like go through each of these phases so it doesn't all just blurt it out at once. Maybe I'll do that. Is there like a Okay, see if there's a nice way to like wait for a keyboard. Yeah. Okay, so I was thinking about an easy way to add a delay between these. One option is to literally like pause until the user presses a key. Because we're not doing any animation and stuff, that would be fine. I mean, if we were doing animation, it would all freeze up. Otherwise, if we want to do it, we kind of need to split this up so it runs over multiple frames, which means we need to know, you know, we can't just write our whole code here like in one big blob. We'd have to have like we're in a mission state and like proceed. When the user presses a key, we like proceed to the next challenge or something like that. But continue like rendering loads of frames. We can probably do that. But for now, no, for now this is okay. Okay. So if there's a failure, what we probably want to do is randomly pick a character who we're gonna injure. So to do that, we first kind of need to work out which characters aren't already injured, and then pick one randomly. Like this, if so we are running, I just noticed a very annoying issue here. So we run into an issue where we've called this thing character, but actually Java already includes something called a character, which is, you know, a character like this, like a letter, which is also a class. And all of these methods it's showing me belong to that as opposed to our character here. So I probably want to rename this. Let's be thematic, just call them a Steam Hound. Probably means a load of other stuff needs to now change. Like this. And a bunch of stuff here probably. Again, if I had a nice IDE, I could just do a quick auto rename and this would all get done for me, but we're gonna do. Now it should give me the correct, hopefully the correct. So I knew there was an error, but it wasn't highlighting stuff. Another thing with this editor is it kind of gets out of sync with the syntax highlighting, right? Like this should be fine now, I think, but missions now need reward money as well. Let's say this is going to give us 50 monies. Are we good now? Stuff still broken. Boom. Okay, seems okay. So what we're trying to do is when you fail a challenge, we're going to injure a character. Again, we're going to use this random function. Let's say characters. Okay. Let's kind of send a couple of extra lines. You can also print that out. So we can say oh no, okay. So there's also a case here where if they were the last character, so you could say if uninjured characters dot size is 1, then everyone's taken out. So okay, an extra new line in there. So let's just add one character who's plainly going to get injured. Oh, if this happens, we should probably bail well out at this stage. So, and you know what as well, when we resolve a mission, actually I'll sort this out afterwards, okay. Do this, I'm gonna do that, we succeeded, keep the thing, okay, we can get to the point where everyone's injured. You know what, when we draw a character, I think we should draw them differently if they're injured, probably. So, let's say, when we draw them, first going to say if they're injured, then I'm going to use this tint command and tint them like dark red, so 1. Otherwise I'm just going to tint them normal color. So white, which will draw them as normal. Okay. Now we should have a better visual image of what's happening. So we do a mission. Okay, character gets injured. Seems good to me. Maybe a bit too dark. So, okay, so let's switch this to... You know what? There's no point. I was going to say switch it to resolve it. Okay, it's way more fun if you can watch this play out stage by stage, right? Yeah. Let's make that happen. So we probably want to change that to like start mission and like continue mission, and then we can kind of control when that happens. Probably means we need kind of active mission. And this active challenge index, because we're going to need to remember we can't just resolve it all at once. We need to remember what part of the mission we're at. So we're kind of going to need to save that separately. So change this to start mission. Let's say board state active mission equals m. Board state dot challenge index equals 0. Then let's make this a void step mission. And I'm going to say challenge is board state dot active mission dot challenges. Kind of a mouthful of a line there, but we're basically saying go into the current mission and pull out the challenge which we're currently on. So then rather than looping through, we're going to have to like call this multiple times over like a longer period of time. It should be okay for us. So if the mission's failed, then that mission can now be null. So, okay, that's the end of the mission in that case. You know what, let's have this return true if the mission is finished. Finished. So then we can say board state dot active challenge index. We can increase that. We can say if active mission dot if we just completed the last one, then we're going to print the mission was a success, and we're going to do this stuff. Otherwise, we're going to return false because there's more to go. And when we start a mission, let's just step it once. So this terminology, like stepping something, is quite common for like doing one incremental bit of progress. And what I think I'm going to do is in this draw function, or no. So I'm going to say if right, so actually okay, let's do it like this. So if we click anywhere when a mission's active, we can do this little block, otherwise it will do this. Active. Okay, cool. Something like this. No, I feel like this doesn't need that. I see, changing my mind about the design of this all over the place. let's give ourselves though a function for okay. So let's say if move this out to another function here. So if it's successful, then we're going to print that. Otherwise, we're going to print our other thing. So I'm thinking now that there's going to be a bit of cleanup we need to do at the end of the mission. We need to like unassign all the characters back into the roster so they can be used for something else. We need to take the mission, like disable the mission and flag it as complete. Potentially need to proceed to the next, generate some whole new missions and stuff. So we definitely want to do this. So we're just going to say end mission false, that's a failure. End mission true. Cool. And here I want to say I'm going to add our money in the mission. So let's say don't want to lose this reference to the active mission just yet because I'm going to need it right now. C dot annoys me that the autocomplete is just not always there for this. Go back in the roster. In the roster, and then let's clear that out. And then also literally just remove that mission. Okay, so when the mission ends, we can, if they succeeded, we print a nice success message, we give them some money, otherwise we print a sad failure message. Then we go through all the characters who are in the mission and reassign them back into the roster. We also clear out that list of missions. Let's clear out the list of assigned characters from the mission. So the mission also no longer has a handle on all those characters. We then remove the mission from the list of missions which are displayed on the screen, and then we set the active mission to null, which will allow like UI interaction stuff to happen again. So I think we can, it'd help to have a couple of missions to try this out. Character into here, a couple into here for good measure. Now we deploy that one. Okay, so we saw that first step happen down there. Scope out the target, Rodeo's observation, target number 2, roll a 6, success. Okay, now we can just kind of click anywhere, hopefully, to do the next step. Boom, sneak into the facility, target is 4, roll a 1, failed, warrior is injured. Okay, next step. defeat the guards. Combat, difficulty 4. Ranger has combat. So did the warrior, but they're knocked out, so that didn't get included, so that is good. Target number is 3, would have been 2 if the warrior was still up. Our roll is 4, we succeeded. Sneak back out of the facility, difficulty 3, target number is 3, roll a 5, success. Cool. So now we see our characters are back in the roster. I could assign them back in. Interesting. Then we can deploy again. Let's do that. Success. Ooh, engineer was injured. Oh, okay. It's kind of a total coincidence that the whole screen turned red, even though that is kind of cool. Interesting. Why did that happen? It happened because after we... Okay, there's kind of a lot of code here. After we drew all these things, I should have reset the tint because the red tint was like carrying around to the next loop where we drew the background and stuff. So let's do that. Okay. Just assign 1 to each. Success. Success, success. Good job. Oh. You failed the last step there, so that's not great. Okay. Success. Oh. Failure. Oh. Not great, everyone's injured. Okay. Okay, what we need now, I think, is a way to get some new missions and proceed kind of to the next round of the game. You know, I should also probably be drawing my like money amount up here, so let's make that happen. Which quite simply is going to be a text. Money, we're going to draw it at okay, so we need something which lets us kind of proceed to the next round. I think the way to do that is we kind of need a function which will do that for us. Let's make it more of a verb than a noun. I feel like that's a better naming scheme. Proceed to next round as opposed to just next round by itself. What do we want to do? Okay, so we want to so I feel like what we want to do is if any Steam Hounds are assigned to missions, we want to put them straight back in the roster. We want to go through all the missions themselves. And also m dot clear that. Clear everything out. Dot missions dot clear. Then we kind of want to put some new missions in, right? So I want to draw the mission. I think I want to... Can I just do something like this? So I'm thinking about the game loop now, and I think what makes sense is maybe the mechanic is like this, right? So if you do a mission, it gives you a reward. When you kind of proceed to the next round, you get dealt out some new missions. But there's a cost, right? Maybe there's like a... If each time you proceed, it's like a new like year in the game or a new month or whatever, then you just have some like fixed money costs. Like maybe it costs you 100. So if you weren't able to... Or 75 or something like that. So if you weren't able to keep your money up, if your money drops below 0, maybe that's the fail state of the game. So I think you can do something like money minus equals, let's put this at the top. Let's say 75. If it's less than 0, let's say if it's strictly less than 0, then do something like okay, there's a bit of narrative going on here. Okay, this kind of makes sense to me as a loop. Otherwise, we need to generate some new missions, right? So, and again, in a board game sense, I'm thinking this of like missions being a deck of cards you draw from. So each round you place some down, and then you're going to pick which characters go into which, and so on. So, let's have something like a mission deck. Right, so instead of this, I'm going to do add these into our mission deck. What I would really appreciate now is like people to throw some ideas for like missions into the chat so I can start populating this with new stuff. Because for now I'm just going to copy paste this. And then I'm going to make a little function here. Right, so the way I'll do this is it's a handy utility here. Shuffle these for me, Java util collections. Okay. So I can say it's literally called shuffle, which is kind of amusing here. Shuffle the deck, and then I'm just going to say let's add another. These are like gameplay constants. And we have like UI constants. Separate these out, cost per round. Say let's see 2. go through and say board state dot missions dot add. Right, so this shuffles the missions and then pulls out the first card and then the second card, basically. But we can tweak that if we wanted more to be laid out. Okay, and then that means we can just use that in the initial setup, like this. Cool. So we probably want something in our little background image to allow us to proceed. So, you know what, I'm just going to draw another janky icon here. What size was this text? 34. Down here. Sure, there's a better way of using this, of like doing these kind of shapes, but this is what I tend to do. This image editor, okay. I'm just going to save that like that. Oh, great, that's just baked into the background image, but we'll be okay. Now we have one extra thing which can happen. So first we try to pick up a character. We click deploy. Then we also have a check of, did we click? You can say we do something very similar to this, except it's going to be even more horrible. So X is 648 and 891. Y is between 744 and 792. If that's the case, then proceed to next round, right? Okay. Then we have one more case, I think, which is we need to detect if we're in like a game over state, right? Which is basically if it's less than 0, then oh, not here. Well, if that's the case, then we kind of want to do a full reset, right? So how do we do that? Let's put this into its own function. Resetting the game means to do the following. Then we can reuse this for like a restart option. Use it in our startup there. Say for the game over state and somebody clicks, then we're going to do a reset. And then I'm going to say something like if let's draw like a game over image. So do like a Okay. Oh. Load that here. And if we're in a game over state, I'm just going to draw that on top. So, okay. So that hopefully means, if I don't get an error here, that I can just click this, oh, and get a null pointer exception. Okay. We need to clear this out if we are. You know what? We can just go through the whole roster and do that. Okay, next round, taxman comes to collect. You run out of money. Reset. Okay. Pretty much there with this game. Okay, so let's put some characters onto this. Let's deploy them. Okay, starting the mission. Scoping out the target, we succeeded. Click for the next round. Stealth, succeeded again. Combat, succeeded again. Okay, succeeded in the whole mission. So right now we could choose to like assign more characters to this, or we could skip straight to the next round. I feel like we've got loads of healthy characters, so we can just deploy them all. Increase our chances of success, 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 success. Okay, succeeded to the next round. We've made a small profit. Let's do the same. Is it a good strategy to just deploy everyone to one mission? Deploy. Oh, got an injury. Succeeded. Okay. Shouldn't let us deploy an injured character. We also need a way for characters to recover. Success, success, success. Boom. Next round. Succeeded. Now we've only got a couple characters, so not looking so hot. Oh, one of us went down. Both of us went down. Mission failed. We're not doing great. Okay, so we need to figure this thing out. So the way I think it should work is that when a character is injured, they're out for the next round. That makes sense? Or they're just out for this round. Okay, let's see what we can do here. Too much stuff in one file also, which I'm not super proud of, but what can I do? So if c dot they're injured, just continue. We can't pick them up. And then when the round starts, we could go through and set them to be not injured again. How does this work out? So you can just put everyone into the first mission. They're injured, they're injured. Looking great. So it's kind of the choice, right? Do I go for this mission and potentially get these injured, or do I wait for the next round even though I'm going to be kind of down on money? Need those $50. Okay, we got something going here. This kind of works. You know what, this may be a reasonable point to leave this for today. I'm not sure this is a fun game just yet, but in terms of the basic logic and the flow of things, I think we have stuff going. So if I were to extend this, what would I do? I would probably... Let's take a screenshot actually. Get to see my OBS setup on my second monitor there. So rather than implementing everything, I'm just going to tag this up with some potential changes, I think. So what could we do? So right now what I'm not doing and what I'd like to do is when you hover over a character, it would show their tags, you know, so like combat. And then also you would have some kind of option here to spend money, maybe a little magnifying glass to get some intel, right? So if you click on that, it would then maybe say, hey, this has like combat, like X2 or something. Each time you click it, it would then reveal something else you need, right? Like you also need stealth. So you'd be making a trade-off between, you know, there'd be some kind of decision making between, do I just assign my characters or do I spend a bit of money first to figure out what traits will be useful in this mission, so then I can assign my characters more strategically to that. So there's a trade-off between, do you want to just gamble and do you want to like invest in finding out more stuff first? So I think that could make the decision making a bit more interesting. Right now it's a bit random, and also all the missions are the same, so the traits you need are the same, so there's no super interesting decision making going on there. But the bones of this are there. Like, it's mostly now some details and resources and loops around that, which you could build in to make this an actual game worth playing, I suppose. Yeah, I kind of figured with this stream, either we'd make something gameplay-wise, which is somewhat compelling, or we'd make something with a bit of like UI and interaction. I've kind of gone for the latter here. Even though it's super basic, you know, this was like under 2.5 hours, so I'm okay with this. I'm okay with this for a stream. We can be reasonably proud of what we've achieved here. Yeah, so I think I'll leave it at that. I will throw some links into the chat for anyone who doesn't know about our Twitter and Discord. So Twitter just for general updates. We post GIFs and in-progress stuff for Steamhounds, the game that we're working on. We also do polls. Actually, let me show you. So you can see some of our new artwork and character stuff that gets revealed for Steamhounds. You also get these votes, which we generally do on a Thursday, the day before these streams, so people can vote on what subject they would like to see. So yesterday we did this thing and people picked the virtual board game. So that's that. I will throw the link in here. Otherwise, you can, if you're interested in Steamhounds, the game where, you know, all of this artwork and stuff is being ripped from, which is the kind of grid-based, turn-based tactical slash JRPG slash Darkest Dungeon-y roster management XCOM-y type deal, then if you jump into our Discord, you can join the playtest for that. And in fact, we're running like a community playtesting event tomorrow. There's still plenty of time to get in there, get the demo of the game, and join us similar kind of time tomorrow for some playtesting and stuff. Okay, I think with that, I will say goodbye. Thanks very much for joining us again, and see you next time.